This one was uncomfortable and rage-inducing, for lack of a better term. I'm John Retlin, and this is my review of Dark Side of the Ring, Jimmy Snuka, and the death of Nancy Argentino. A death that Jimmy Snuka did not spend one motherfucking day in jail for. And I'm going to tell you right now, I thought I was going to be able to handle this without pausing it. Nope, I had to pause this one twice because I was in a fucking rage. I'm still in a fucking rage. I knew some of the stuff about this because when the investigation got reopened, because Jimmy Snuka's a motherfucking murderer who got away with it, a lot of this stuff came to light and you realize, holy shit, there was a lot of cover up and stuff going on here. So, for those of you unfamiliar, you're better off Googling this stuff and especially watching this episode, but Google and find out some more of this stuff because there's a lot to dive into. So, how was this episode? It's right on par with the Benoit episode because it's very chilling, it's very anger inducing, and it makes you realize there are some real pieces of motherfucking shit in wrestling. And some of your favorites maybe murdered somebody and got the fuck away with it. So, anyway, Jericho narrates, does a terrific job. Clips of people talking about Nancy's murder, and we get WWF clips and how they had a lot of talents that they got from various promotions, and how fans loved Snuka from the moment they saw him. And he had been in various promotions before that, but he really exploded in popularity once he got to WWF. Mainly because they said, "Oh, he's a wild, crazy guy that's coked out of his motherfucking mind." But don't worry, that's not going to factor into this shit at all later. Oh, wait, yeah, it will. Whew. The Tonga Kid, aka Sam Fatu, is talking about how he didn't want to get into wrestling, but he was in juvie, punched out a bus driver. And his mom's brothers, Afa and Sika, helped train him because they were like, you're going to channel this anger and you're going to get into wrestling. I don't remember too much about the Tonga Kid. I know he was in for a while, but I don't remember him doing way too much. So we have Don Morocco. He mentions how Snuka grew up almost homeless, and Don Morocco and Jimmy Snuka are in lockstep as far as how, their feud went. I mean, they had a blood feud for a while, and Don Morocco, one of the greatest heels ever in wrestling. He talked quite a bit. There is a lot to unpack with this episode, and I can't even do it justice. I can't do justice for just how goddamn angry I am. I almost turned as red as like parts of this poster back here, which is unhealthy, by the way. But now Marco talks about that, talked about how Snuka gravitated towards wrestling because he wanted to be accepted and he could do all the coke he wanted and murder all the girls that he wanted, abuse all the girls he wanted, and get away with it. Because Vince McMahon decided to pay the detectives off. Oh, don't worry, that's going to get mentioned a little bit later. He was mega popular from the word go. Vince saw this and pushed him as his top star, even though he wasn't the champion, because at that time he was still trying to, I believe, buy it from his dad, and he was trying to go national. And Bob Backlund was a champion, and Bob Backlund would get booed. Bob Backlund would get booed out of the goddamn building because the fans loved Snuka. He had to be turned to a babyface, even though he was a heel for a while, and it fit him being a heel because he was really a piece of shit. So it's easy to boo a piece of shit. Irvin Mushnick, nephew of Sam Mushnick, very, very popular promoter, talked about how Snuka had to be switched. Irvain, sorry, and I apologize if I mispronounce any of these names because of my rage. He talked about that, and he had some good stuff to say here. Lorraine, Nancy's sister, one of Nancy's sisters, talks about how Nancy lived a sheltered life and had a childhood friend named Ellen who was engaged to Johnny Rodz, resident jobber and enhancement guy that worked in WWE and would help break in a lot of guys like, hey, oh, you're going to come in, you're a big star, well, you're going to get with me, and if you don't have respect, I'm going to beat it in you. I believe Ted DiBiase mentioned that on a Legends of Wrestling episode. And they frequented Madison Square Garden, which was the mecca for WWE, and Nancy meets Jimmy, and love blossoms. She really gravitates towards him, his wild craziness, the fact that she's like, I've always wanted to be murdered by a crazy Samoan guy, or a crazy Fiji guy. Sorry, I don't mean to be offensive to anybody that's Samoan or Fiji or any of that. But she falls for him because she always wanted to be murdered by somebody that was clearly, stronger and everything, and knew he could get away with it. So Buddy Rogers was Jimmy Snuka's manager at the time, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, and He drove him around and mentioned at one point the Snuka was on so much coke that Rogers had enough. He's like, nope, can't do this, can't do this. Nancy takes over as a driver, and Nancy, at 22 years old, after living a sheltered life, is in love, completely in love, and decides to drive Jimmy around. The stepfather had his doubts about what, Jimmy was or how Jimmy was. Like, just something that didn't seem right. And then we get Luis Argentino, or Luis Argentino. She talked about how Jimmy, one night they're going to have like a Chinese takeout. And she sits down, she's just being her normal chatty self. And the Jimmy, I don't know what the hell the deal was, but he went like this. He went like, like this hand motion, like saying that he could. Oh, like he's doing a wrestling thing. No, I think legit would have killed her. And Nancy stopped it and then went and talked to him. And she's like, Luis is like, you need to get away from him. And then later, she goes back down and talks to Jimmy. He offers her coke as a peace offering. Because that's exactly what you fucking do when you're in the right goddamn head. You offer somebody cocaine. That's a great way to, bond a family. Fucking idiot. Hope he's burned in hell for what he fucking did. And he deserves to burn in hell. So anyway, he was very protective of her. To the point he abused her. Because that's exactly what a level-headed individual would do. He was married. He lied about it. Nancy found out about it. He apparently said that he was separated. Nope. He was living with his wife and their 4 kids. And speaking of the kids, I want to say really, really quickly, to anybody that is going to target any of his kids that are on Twitter, you got Sim Snuka. I don't know if he is on Twitter or not, but especially Tamina, who is his daughter, I believe his oldest daughter, and she is in WWE. Look, don't fucking target the kids. It's like when David Benoit got targeted for a lot of the stuff his dad did. No, let's not do that. Let's not put the sins of the father, and I'm not religious, the sins of the father onto the children. We're not going to do that. If I see anybody fucking doing that, I'm going to fucking report them. Because that's ridiculous. You can say whatever the fuck you want about Jimmy Snuka. He's a goddamn piece of shit, and this episode proved that. But we're not going to target the kids. As a wrestling fan community, can we just agree to just target the people that are pieces of shit and not the children? If it's proven that they're pieces of shit later, fine, but not now. So, 2 separate lives. You live in 2 separate lives. And then Kevin Ammerman, he was a journalist. He was one of the people that was a driving force in the investigation being reopened later. He said hotel people were calling one night in 83. It sounds like a man is being a woman. Nancy called Lorraine, you have to help me, he's chasing me. All this stuff, police are called, they're talking. The police tried to stop him. He was throwing the cops. The police dogs, he was trying to fight the police dogs because he was coked out of his goddamn mind. Because he was a cokehead and a fucking abuser. He's a fucking moron. Have I mentioned that? And then, Nancy called later, or I believe her, she called her sister and said, oh, it's just a misunderstanding, nothing wrong, don't worry. Adam Clark, he wrote the 30th anniversary of the death. He wrote about that, and Nancy reneged on her statement. Basically said, nope, he didn't abuse me. He didn't do any of that. Classic. Oh, he only did it because he loved me. It wasn't all that. And I'm not victim blaming here, but unfortunately, that is the first sign that you really need to try and somebody needs to step in and try to get her away. Try to do this before it got worse. And it got worse. WWE basically relied on Nancy to drive him. They go to Allentown for syndication championship wrestling. And it's May 10th, 1983. And Jimmy and Nancy are at the hotel. He leaves to film some stuff, comes back to the hotel, and then leaves, and then comes back around 9 p.m. And then suddenly sirens, and, the police are called and everything. Snuka's arrested, according to, Sam Fatu. He looked scared. What the hell was going on? She was found unresponsive in the hotel, Nancy was. And Shirley Reeve, who was a paramedic, said she was there the night of her death, that that Jimmy said they must have wrestled too much, and she pushed her and she hit her head. And then it took her to the hospital. Snuka tells everyone what happened, this kind of stuff. Oh, she slipped, she hit her head, and it, that mentioned how he abused her and stuff like that, but that he suddenly didn't remember it later. Family found out over the phone. They couldn't even go see their goddamn daughter. They weren't able to see their daughter because she was trapped basically in this relationship. and Jimmy killed her, and they couldn't get the justice that they deserved. Jimmy would then later change his story and said she stopped off the side of the road to take a piss and then slipped and hit her head when she was trying to run back to the car. Morocco talks about how that night he was with the detective, and Vince basically gets on the phone because Vince was calling Morocco and said, oh, Snuka will cooperate, and he was released without charge. It gets better, folks. Morocco, well, yeah, anyway, what's up about Morocco? Funerals, Snuka was in short shorts and flip-flops and cried over her body and said she looks terrible. Buddy Rogers was there also. The Undertaker, it was hard to make her look that good because she had a huge bruise around her neck and abrasions all over her body, consistent with abuse. Because that's what he fucking did. His career didn't slow down. Morocco kept going. I mean, there's that infamous cage dive. Morocco was worried, though, because if this investigation led to Snuka being arrested, he would lose money. And Morocco kind of came across like a dick there, but he did have a wrestler's mindset to where this is a hot program and he didn't want to lose his money. He obviously wasn't happy that anybody potentially got murdered, but he had a wrestler's mindset. I'm not excusing it, but he wanted to make money and was hoping that maybe this just turned out to not be true. But then it turned out to be true. And we get Carol Snuka, who was Jimmy's widow. She mentions how people would still say something to Jimmy, how he murdered somebody. And I'm not saying that I just hate to say it, but if you're married to somebody and you know what they did, that's a fucking piece of shit thing to do. And this one girl, apparently, the night soon or a night soon after Jimmy had murdered Nancy and it had come to light, somebody said, "Hey, you goddamn murderer, when are you going to kill another girl?" And it haunted him. You have Frederick Conjure. He was the former police chief in 1983. He said the investigation didn't reveal anything worth charging. It sounded like this guy just didn't fucking care, or he didn't want to put in the legwork, or he was fucking paid off by Vince McMahon and didn't want to admit it on camera, because you don't want to take payoffs and then admit it 30 years later, because you could be charged with something, or it could be unethical, or you could just be seen as a fucking piece of shit that took money from a wrestling promoter because you didn't want to do your job. But that's speculation, of course. Police never do that. And then we get to, and forgive me, going back to my notes here, Nancy's family was told it was an accident by the police and that nothing would be happening. Vince then called the mother and offered her $25,000. Now, right there, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I do still watch WWE, but that is why something always sticks in my throat with Vince, that he had the gall to not just say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm a wrestling promoter, but murder, it's one thing to get caught with drugs, but murder is something. He should have cut ties with Snuka right there. He should have cut ties with Snuka. Brought somebody in and just gotten rid of Snuka, because that's murder. You can't cover that up. And it proves that this was a goddamn cover-up. Whew. He offered her hush money, basically. They filed a wrongful death suit, $500,000. Snuka didn't show. His widow even said that he should have shown. In fact, he didn't, was ridiculous. She came across at least as sympathetic because she came into his life after this murder happened. Still not excusing what he did, but still. His career went downhill. Just too fucking bad that the murderer got karma biting him in the ass. It's what he fucking deserved. He fucking deserved to lose everything. Because he fucking murdered somebody. Anyway, autopsy. So the investigation gets reopened. And then you get the autopsy reports. Nancy's injuries were consistent with domestic violence. And the last line is the most chilling thing. I believe the case should be investigated as a homicide until proven otherwise. The chief of police blew it off. Former chief of police basically blew it off. He just seemed to. That's just the way I took it. Snuka's autobiography, he talks about Nancy's death. Vince paid them off, basically. It's like, I believe his widow said that Jimmy had told her, later, Vince came down with a briefcase and said, don't worry about it, it's done. And the family hated how Nancy was portrayed in the autobiography. There were clips of Snuka on a radio show discussing Nancy's death. She slipped, hit her head, all that. The chief did not know who was in the car, but Sam Fatu was. He was in the car with them on the way to Allentown, Pennsylvania. So there's no way she could have slipped and hit her head because Jimmy was fucking lying because he abused her. So, the chief didn't know that, but he seemed blown because, again, he was probably paid off and he was trying to not get caught in a lie. Didn't do a very good job. Investigation reopened. Grand jury says Snuka should be charged. And then he was suffering from cancer. Oh, I'm sorry that karma started to eat at him and everything after he got away with murder for 30 fucking years. So, his health had deteriorated. He had brain damage, was unfit to stand trial. And then Snuka died cancer 2 years later. Career aside, he will always be remembered as a murderer. The family said, we don't feel like we've got justice. We ever got justice. Let me just say this much in closing. If you are a Jimmy Snuka fan, you can appreciate Jimmy Snuka in the ring. It's like you can appreciate Chris Benoit in the ring. I do say that. But I do hope, in closing, I say this. I hope Jimmy Snuka suffered every goddamn moment he had that. I don't wish injury or illness on anybody, but since karma bit him and he suffered a career downslide, he deserved every bit of karma that he got. He got away with murder. Vince paid off the detectives, allegedly. And guess what? Jimmy Snuka deserved to deal with that. He deserved to deal with that. And sure, I'm not going to wish cancer or any illness on anybody, but to have that guilt eat at you that, oh, he knew what he did. Yeah, he knew what he did and he knew he got away with it. That's exactly why he talked about it in his autobiography, because he got cocky. And then the investigation got reopened, but oh no, suddenly conveniently he had so much brain damage and dementia, he didn't know what he did. He knew what he did. And you know what? I don't have any sympathy for Jimmy Snuka. Fuck Jimmy Snuka. I hope he's burning in hell. I hope he's been burning in hell for the last 3 goddamn years. And that's all I gotta fucking say about that. So, Dark Side of the Ring, pretty goddamn good. But boy, I'm in a goddamn rage, so I'm gonna go to goddamn bed, goddammit. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin, Jimmy Snuka. I hope he's burning in hell, and I'll see you soon.